Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Weather Impact live here show on WCNC Plus. You have myself, again, of course, Brad is out of town, if you've noticed the past few days, at a conference. And we're joined by the lovely meteorologist Becca Birdsall, who's going to be helping us track some of these storms, talk a little bit about the heat and humidity that we had today throughout the rest of the show. So what we're going to start with is talking about what's happening right now, which is a lot of warnings, a lot of severe thunderstorms across the area. So some of the first storms that we are seeing right now are just south of Charlotte. And I guess we're not just seeing these have been around for a while. I'm going to pause this here so you guys can see how much lightning is within some of these storms. Now, the reason why this is important is because the lightning count typically shows us how strong the storm is or whether or not it's strengthening in general. So far in the last 5 to 10 minutes, we've had about 136 lightning strikes, now 137. And these cells that are moving through parts here of Waxhaw and Weddington, you can see Mineral Springs being impacted, Baker's being impacted, Fort Mill, Red River. Now, most of these severe thunderstorms have been issued for 60+ mile-per-hour winds. Now, some of these strong updrafts also indicate that we could see quarter-sized hail. We'll talk a little bit more about storm reports here coming up with Becca, but most of the storm reports we've had so far that we've gotten confirmed pictures and videos from have been closer to penny and pea sized. And that doesn't mean that it's not hail, of course, it just means that the hail itself is less impactful. But just now, we've had a few more additional severe thunderstorm warnings issued just into our viewing area as well. So, oh my goodness gracious, this thing just has a life of its own. There you go. So some of this is happening in Union County. This cell here, just in southern portions here of Union County, just south of Monroe. Now, this one is an interesting one because we have a really, really strong radar return. Notice this little cluster here of really, really bright pink shading. What that's telling me is that this likely has really, really strong updrafts and is most likely producing at least some hail. Now, typically when you see such a strong return like that, it normally means you're closer to that quarter size mark. So you can actually see how high that storm is right now, how strong and tall the storm is. Essentially what happens when that occurs is that the storm is so strong, it's just so high up in the atmosphere because the strong updrafts are driving it that way, that eventually you have bigger hailstones embedded within them. Now, normally when we look at our hail tracker, essentially what this is populating is these areas that have really strong updrafts, but you can notice a few of these little clusters have started to get closer to the bright blue shading, which if you look at the top here, the hail tracker, normally this again indicating closer to quarter size. So we have that near Indian Trail there in Union County, all the way down toward Wesley Chapel, Weddington, Waxhaw, some smaller hailstones. But notice this little cluster here. This is the one near Indian Land. We have some areas of the darker blue shading, and so that could indicate closer to golf ball size hail, which I know we did have some reports of that earlier today, and portions of the mountain. So this is essentially right on the edge between Lancaster County and southern Union County. So again, we're going to be watching this really closely to see how much longer this progresses, but you can see that's near Providence Road there, just west of 321. Now, as we take a wider view, there's a few additional severe thunderstorms, one here in Gaston County, one in northern parts of York County, as well as additional development over on the eastern side where you can see all of the storm activity that just clipped our eastern communities and now is pushing closer to Florence, Greenville, Spartanburg, places like that. But I do want to bring in Becca. Of course, there's so many storms that you can actively track, but we want to talk about some of the things that have already happened. I know we've had some hail reports, some reports of trees down in a few spots. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you've seen so far with some of these worst storms?
Yeah, that's right. Especially within the past couple of hours, I'd say the majority of those storm reports were actually east and west of the Charlotte area, especially over towards the Raleigh-Durham area, all the way down into Fayetteville. Numerous reports of trees down and lots of power outages within that area. And just recently, I'd say within the past hour and a half, storms have really started to pop off in and around the Charlotte metro with several reports of trees down, also reports of some small sized hail as well. So let's get into some of those storm reports that we're seeing here in Mecklenburg County. This is reported at South Park Mall. Utility lines downed along Providence Road. This happened around 5:37, so that was about a half hour ago. We also do have some video. I believe, was this in Fort Mill? Yes. Okay. So this was video taken from Fort Mill. You could see intense rainfall and the potential for some small sized hail there. But what you can also see are the really intense winds that were accompanying some of these severe thunderstorm warnings. So the main theme that we've been seeing just over the past hour is near stationary storms or moving around 5 miles per hour, but also packing a punch with intense rainfall rates and rapid strengthening as well as small sized hail. So we got a couple of other reports over towards Weddington with 1 inch in diameter hail that is quarter sized. Also got a report of quarter sized hail up towards Cleveland County as well. Trees down being reported over towards Burke County. This is over towards the city of Crossnor as well. And of course, as we zoom out big picture, we still have a lot of activity currently on Doppler radar with numerous severe thunderstorm warnings just across the area. Again, the main concern with this is not just going to be rainfall and lightning that we've been seeing over the past couple of days, but really intense winds, 50 to 60 miles per hour. When you combine that with intense rainfall rates from what we're seeing, you can easily see down trees and down power lines, which is exactly what we've been seeing across much of the area and why we were weather alert for storms today, but also the heat as well. So switching over to radar currently, want to show you the couple of severe thunderstorm warnings that we currently have in and around the metro. Again, a lot of these packing a punch as they slowly move to the south. Now, these are carrying rainfall rates anywhere between 1.5 inch per hour to about 3. So this is also a time where people are headed home from work or school. A lot of people out on the roadways now. Definitely exercise some caution if you do have to venture out, and take it easy out there, as this is likely going to be a nightmare for any traffic plans that you may be having. Want to also get to some of the lightning strikes. The lightning has actually gone down over towards Gaston County. Previously had about 90 strikes, so that is continuing to weaken out, but the winds are probably going to be the biggest story going into the next couple of hours. Winds gusting pretty intensely over the last half hour or so. With storm reports just from yesterday, of course, Lake Murray, South Carolina, that was the big story. 18 people got struck by lightning. So not only do we have a big lightning risk for today, but of course, damaging winds and hail, which is why I want you to stay weather alert all the way through the evening hours. Brittany.
My goodness, there's just so many storms to talk about. We don't really get activity like this, I feel like, very often. And you can actually see from our Dallas tower cam, we can actually pop that up for one more second. I mean, I definitely don't need to be on camera to talk about that, but we see some of these really strong storms that were moving through the area just about a few minutes or so ago. Some of these storms in Gaston County producing 60 mile per hour winds. We're going to take a trek over there so you can kind of see this cluster. I mean, there's essentially more places that we are seeing storms at this point than maybe more places that we aren't seeing storms. So western side of Gaston County near Kings Mountain, just south there of Cherville, you can see as you continue to get closer to Gaston County, Beaverbrook, Gastonia, eventually over toward Lowell and in McAdamville, we're going to be tracking some of that same heavy rain, lots of lightning strikes. I mean, at this point, you just have to assume that every single storm that you do have over you likely has at least heavy rain. What's interesting here about this particular camera is, of course, it looked a little bit better a few minutes or so ago just because the storm itself was further away from our Dallas tower cam. But essentially, when you see that curve on the left, I guess it's technically right side. Yeah, right side of your screen. That curve is essentially indicating all of that heavy rain that's being pushed down. And oftentimes this also will have some of that small to medium sized hail mixed within it. But it's those same winds, of course, pushing the hail and the heavy rain to the ground that also can cause the really damaging winds that we sometimes do see. Now, haven't seen a lot of significant wind reports so far that would make me believe that we've seen upwards of 70 or so miles per hour, at least across the metro. But we did have pretty significant wind gusts as well earlier today. And I mean, just goes to tell you that the slow moving storms too, causing the training, kind of that heavy rain risk. I mean, they are just continuing to develop. One interesting little factor to note here on radar, these are called gust fronts or outflow boundaries. You might have heard them being called two different things. If we can pop up radar here for a second. If you look at radar, you can actually see just south of Greenville, Spartanburg, all the way across Fountain Inn and all the way down toward Chester. we can pop it right. There we go. You can see essentially a green little line of what looks like rain. That is actually the outflow being picked up on radar. So essentially what happens, think of a classic afternoon thunderstorm where you see or feel that really, really strong gust of wind before hopefully you're heading inside, since when thunder roars move indoors. That's essentially the gust front or the outflow boundary being pushed out from the main part of the thunderstorm. Keep in mind, we had all these storms here. We have this really huge cluster of storms near Greenville, Spartanburg, and we have the storms here. So this outflow is essentially coming from all of these storms being shoved on the southern side. So along an outflow boundary or a gust front, what we eventually get is additional storms that develop. So these tiny little storms here just now developing in Chester, also prompting a severe thunderstorm warning. That also developed along the outflow. A lot of these storms actually developed along the outflow of that storm earlier that we had in Shelby. We had that during our 6 o'clock hour, but we actually had a team member who sent us a picture and additionally a video of their pool essentially being turned over. It was one of the outdoor pools, and yes, it did not have water in it, but the pool was strong enough to be shoved away because of those 60-mile-per-hour winds. And then again, with that same outflow, we've just seen these storms continuing to expand and continuing to spread. Now, we do want to continue to track the storm activity that we have, but we can't remiss the fact that today was the hottest day of the year. Not only the hottest day of the year, but had the highest heat index values that we've had in quite some time here in the Charlotte area, with a high temperature around 100 and heat index values around 110. So Becca, I want to bring you back in to talk a little bit more about what that heat means when it comes to not only the instability for us to get additional thunderstorms, but comparison to normal. I know you did a really great story on this a few days ago with not just the heat in Charlotte, but the heat in the mountains too. But I mean, 100 doesn't happen every day in Charlotte.
Sky high humidity. That is what we had in the forecast for today. And the highest dew point of the year so far was earlier today at 77 degrees. And in fact, our heat index value was at 100 degrees, feels like, by around 10 o'clock. The highest heat index we reached this afternoon was 110, and the hottest temperature of this year was 100 degrees. And we reached that officially at the Charlotte Douglas Airport. Of course, this sky high humidity and the heat is what's helping fuel these thunderstorms. Now, wet microburst is basically what we were in the forecast for today. That's why the Storm Prediction Center had us under enhanced risk for severe storms, because wet microbursts prefer an atmosphere and an environment that is hot and humid. And so the atmosphere was primed for these conditions, which is why we are seeing basically any thunderstorm that has developed across the area has turned severe, with strong winds, also with really intense rainfall rates, lightning, and of course some hail attached with this as well. Now, up in the mountains also, I can't exclude them because they've broke records not only today but also yesterday as well. This was over in Ashe County in Jefferson. Yesterday they got a record high temperature of 94. The previous record was 93 back in 1930. And today they also broke that record, hit 94 once again. The record was also 93 back in 1914. Now, Boone, also up towards the mountains, got very close to hitting record high temperatures, but we're just a few degrees shy. But all of us, we're feeling the heat. It is 6:42 and it is 94 degrees out there, a dew point of 72. That is making it feel like 102 out there. And of course, we officially hit 100 degrees, the century mark here at the airport. That brings us to a consecutive streak where we have reached highs 90 degrees or above. We are at day 6 and we will likely continue that streak over the next week ahead. Now, we do still have those extreme heat alerts out. We've got that heat advisory in place for the Charlotte area until about 8 o'clock tonight, but also another heat advisory was issued for tomorrow, I believe between about 2 and 8 p.m. And this is going to or 6 or 8 p.m. And it's going to be for those heat advisories that climb close to that 105 mark once again, which is typically where we start to see more of that dangerous heat potential. So we are not done just yet. Your hourly heat index for tomorrow will likely be staying in the upper 90s, but most of us will have a chance to creep up into the lower 100s. Now, some good news that heat dome is eventually going to go away and we'll be back to near average summer-like temperatures, especially towards the end of the work week. So there is some relief in sight, but we've got a hot month ahead. Brittany?
I think that's an important note too when it comes to the heat and humidity that we've talked about for a few days now, because we see it, we hear all the time around this time of year. Don't be dramatic, you guys. It's always hot and humid around the summertime, and that is definitely true if you're from the Carolinas or you just moved here, but we're not always this hot and humid. Becca just told you essentially the rarity of 100 degrees and the rarity that we get to 110. And again, that instability is enough that prompted all of these storms. In fact, you can see this really, really strong rain shaft here from our Monroe camera. I believe this is looking off toward the south and west right now, where some of those storms are continuing to push through southern parts of Union County. Oh, James actually telling me that that's north. So that's looking toward, it looks like those storms in Matthews. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at where those storms are. You can see a little bit of back building happening with some of these storms because earlier a lot of these storms are moving away from southern Union County, and so essentially they're looking right now. Okay, so if this is Monroe, we're essentially looking at storms here. So essentially north and northwest. Okay, good to know. So a lot of these storms in Mecklenburg County do look like they're back building. We were starting to see some of those dissipate, but now we're getting additional storms on the same side. So Mecklenburg County, Union County, if you have the WCNC Charlotte mobile app, you probably got the alerts about the severe thunderstorm warnings. Our awesome producer, James, did get in my ear right when Becca started talking to give an update on a report that we had, this coming in from Kings Mountain. So essentially, if you're not familiar with the area of Kings Mountain, right on the edge between Cleveland County and Gaston County, the report was of a person trapped inside of a structure. It doesn't look like we have any information on what caused the structure to the person to be trapped, instead when it comes to, collapsed building, things like that. We don't have any information there, but that's Kings Mountain. So our team's going to work a little bit harder to try to get more information on that. We also got an official report of a gust of around 60 miles an hour in Monroe. So again, goes on track with what we're already currently seeing elsewhere across the area. Not looking like we're seeing a lot of new additional storm reports. So we're going to get back to radar and just show you what's happening right now. So again, severe thunderstorm warning still in effect for western Union County into southern Union County, Providence, Weddington, Waxhaw, Wesley Chapel. And go a little bit further west, and I mean more of the same, right? Light rain over Pineville and South Charlotte, but we have strong storms and a cluster of all these individual severe thunderstorm warnings. TGK, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, really, really strong signature of some increasing storm activity here right north of TGK. So essentially this is right over Lake Wiley. You can see all of this large cluster here of lightning strikes. Let's see how many they're reporting in the last 5 to 10 minutes. About 35. That's a decent amount. Speaking of lightning strikes, Becca, we were talking about this earlier. You did a story earlier this week about lightning safety because it's Lightning Safety Awareness Week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about I shouldn't have to say why lightning safety, but, why that was first put in place, like what the ultimate goal is here. And I know we did have, of course, the report of about 18 people struck yesterday.
Right.
So it's I hate to say it, but it's the perfect week, I feel like, to have the lightning safety conversation.
Absolutely. And I'd say lightning usually takes a back seat when we get severe thunderstorms because there's a lot of wind and there's a lot of hail to talk about. But in this case, just within the vicinity of these severe thunderstorm warnings across the Charlotte area, we have 217 lightning strikes. And it is National Lightning Safety Week. And this first started in the beginning of the 2000s, where an average of about 50 to 60 people died per year due to a lightning-related death. Now fast forward to about 2025, 2024. That number has gone down to an average of about 20. Now, so far this year, we've had 4 lightning-related deaths. The most recent one was actually just this past weekend. A man was on his honeymoon in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, just on the water. And the unfortunate thing about lightning is you don't know where it's going to strike. And sometimes outside of a storm, it can strike anywhere up to 5 to even 10 miles away, which is why the National Lightning Safety Council urges you, especially during the summer where it's peak lightning month, actually it peaks in August, to keep an eye on the sky. And even if you see any signs of a developing thunderstorm, that is when you need to get in your safe spot, especially as most lightning related deaths and injuries do happen on the water. Again, unfortunately, exactly what we saw yesterday over towards Lake Murray, South Carolina. Fortunately, looks like all people did survive, so that was good. So lightning safety is going to be good, especially with this system as it continues to work its way down to the south. Again, lightning can't strike 10 miles away from a thunderstorm, so hunker down. It's hot out there where it's not storming. Those heat index values are very, very intense out there. Do want to go ahead and get you to some of these lightning statistics and change over to that. The worst places to be are going to be on open fields, top of a hill, near tall, isolated trees, also near water or metal. Best place to be is going to be inside a car or a building. And I believe that we might have our weather IQ on lightning safety that I want to go ahead and toss to. When National Lightning Safety Awareness Week began in 2001, lightning killed an average of 55 people per year in the U.S. Thanks to better awareness and safety education, that number is now down to about 20 per year. Still, lightning has claimed more than 700 lives in the U.S. since 2001. According to data from the National Lightning Safety Council, your odds of being struck are 1 in 1.7 million in a given year. So far in 2025, 4 people have died from lightning strikes. A 29-year-old man was in the water in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, when lightning struck on June 20th. In April, a man died while fishing in Goldsboro. That's North Carolina's 23rd lightning fatality since 2006, putting the state in the top 10 for lightning deaths. South Carolina has had 12 lightning-related deaths since 2006, ranking in the top 30. All 2025 victims have been men, part of a consistent trend. 80% of all lightning deaths are male. That's based on 492 cases from 2006 to 2024, with the majority of the activities being leisure-related. June through August is peak lightning season, and 34% of fatal strikes happen during water activities like swimming, fishing, or boating. So if you're headed outside this summer, have a lightning plan. Check the forecast, use radar or lightning apps, and if you hear thunder, you're too close. Get to a fully enclosed building or a hard-topped car. Not a tent, not a shelter, definitely not under a tree. Once inside, avoid plumbing, corded electronics, and windows. Stay put for 30 minutes after the last thunder before going back outside. The takeaway, most lightning deaths are preventable. From the Weather Impact Team, I'm meteorologist Becca Birdsall.
And so on top of course, the lightning, which thank you so much, Becca, that was awesome. A lot of lightning strikes, right? We know that is not a threshold to meet for a severe thunderstorm warning, and a lot of times I think it confuses people a little bit. So the specific criteria for severe thunderstorm warning: 60-mile-per-hour winds, quarter-sized hail, or a tornado. And of course, the tornado risk was 0 today. We knew the gusty wind risk was high, but we've also had a pretty decent chance for hail as well. Now, while we haven't had any official pictures or videos come into our newsroom of quarter-sized hail, we've had a lot of penny and pea-sized hail. A lot of these actually coming from our awesome viewers who sent these to me via Twitter, so I really appreciate that. This is coming from John there in Ballantyne. It's about pea-sized hail. Again, any kind of reference point that you have where you can kind of put it, again, on your hand near something that it's easy to reference the size, that's great. This was actually from Jennifer Wagner, also some pea-sized hail. Tiny on the welcome map, but hail nonetheless. And actually, James, if you scroll up, there was a video that just popped up that someone tagged Brad in from Fort Mill that you could actually see a really good video of hail there as well. So if we can pop that up just so people can see the reference point. I did retweet it, so if it's hard to tell on Brad's page, but yeah. He has all those auto warnings. They're amazing, but it's hard to find the pictures there. Yeah, so that's the video I was talking about. So that's coming in from Matt Rogers from Fort Mill. Sometimes tiny hail like that too can look like really heavy rain being shoved toward the ground. So if you look at the street, it looks like it's heavy rain and just winds, but a lot of that is hail being mixed in. So we're going to go back to radar just to kind of show you what's currently happening right now. We essentially have this large swath of severe thunderstorm warnings that are kind of pieced, isolated together. At this point, I wouldn't so much focus on where the severe thunderstorm warning is as much as I would focus on the fact that if you're in any of these areas, you should be preparing for heavy rain, again, frequent lightning, gusty winds, and hail. So we have this strong storm that's pushing south of Gaston County in here, really south Gaston County into northern York County. We have a huge cluster here of a lot of lightning strikes. Again, I know Becca just mentioned lightning safety, but it's not even just about lightning safety. We also, as meteorologists, look at those big clusters and big developments of a lot of lightning to show when there's additional strengthening, because they can indicate that the storm is growing taller, indicating a better chance for high updrafts and more hail, or it's starting to push out more and gain more strength. And it's these areas that continue to push south. So southern York County, Chester County, huge burst there. Look at that over the past 30 minutes or so near Chester. And these are all the areas that also were hot and humid, just like the rest of the area today, but haven't yet been tapped into any of that humidity. Now, after sunset, a lot of this is going to start to dissipate because, again, we'll lose that daytime heating of the day. But at least for the time being, you're going to see these large clusters of additional storms. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to back out here so you can see this. Along the outflow boundary, we also have this additional storm development. So here's Greenville, Spartanburg. You can see that line of that additional outflow all the way into Chester County. That's where that storm came from. And then now you have that back building and training flow coming in from the storms from York County, now also pushing into southern Chester County as well. I think one area too that hasn't really seen any kind of significant development is these southwestern portions of Lancaster County. So actually the town of Lancaster itself, and then as you push south and west toward Great Falls. So as these storms continue that movement, we'll likely see them to continue to blow up and continue to gain strength. So again, primary impacts here with the storms: gusty winds 60 miles an hour and quarter-sized hail. That will be at a maximum. So far, again, not seeing any official reports of quarter-sized hail, but we've had plenty of pea-size, plenty of penny-size as well. Again, we mentioned this before, but 60-mile-per-hour wind was officially reported at the Monroe Airport. If you're familiar, it's the Monroe Executive Airport there in Union County. So definitely seeing those strong storms, official confirmation. That's why we look for those, of course, official confirmation numbers to know that we know that that report there caused the 60-mile-per-hour winds. And again, I mentioned earlier today, I don't want to forget about the mountains and foothills, but there were some isolated strong thunderstorm warnings there, severe thunderstorm warnings around 2 o'clock or so that did also produce about 60 miles per hour, as well as some large hail closer to golf ball size. So those really blew up really quickly, and a lot of that also has to do with the heat and humidity, the heating of the day. Becca, are you seeing anything else new to report other than, again, just the fact that we just have these continuous warnings that are slowly shifting south? Because I haven't seen a lot of new development further north, except for that one little cell there in northern Gaston County.
Yeah, the one thing that I'd point out, just by looking at the South Carolina Department of Transportation cameras, you can actually see how intense that rainfall is falling and how slow traffic is moving because of it. So it wouldn't surprise me, just with how slow moving these thunderstorms, if there is a little bit of ponding on the roadway. Of course, it is rush hour traffic. What I'm also seeing on the DOT camera is what appears to be an accident, and this is close to Gold Hill Road. So I'm looking at cameras on I-77 just across York County. So definitely take it slow and easy out there. I did also see several lightning strikes within one of these DOT cameras as well. Zooming in on street conditions, these are the conditions that you will be facing as you head outdoors for today. Again, if you can hunker down, it's rush hour traffic. It is already going to be busy out there as these thunderstorms continue to push down to the south. That outflow boundary was absolutely something that I was looking at too, Brittany, so that was a good call. Sometimes alongside that outflow boundary, you could have more thunderstorm development, but I did put this on a loop just from the past 2 hours because these thunderstorms have really popped off since about 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and we've had a lot of severe thunderstorm warnings across the area. So the atmosphere was absolutely primed for this, again, which is why we were weather alert, not only for the heat, but also for the storm potential as well. Storm reports over the last 24 hours, you can see still the majority has been east and west of the Charlotte area, but starting to get more and more reports just across the metro area. Reports of trees down, a couple of power outage issues as well, even one reported over towards South Park Mall as well. Want to also indicate that this is really hindering visibility out there. So if you do have any plans, want to head outdoors, just keep that in mind as well. With these thunderstorms that are slow moving, dumping a lot of rainfall, we are also under an excessive rainfall impact, and localized flooding will also be a possibility. Brittany?
Yeah, so as we continue to track these thunderstorms, we are actually going to stay here on the secondary stream on WCNC Plus. So when you go to WCNC Plus on the App Store, you're essentially going to have an option for 2 different streams. Sometimes that's live radar and something else, some kind of awesome video report that we're showing. In this case, it's going to be radar, Becca, and myself continuing to track these storms. But on the other stream, you're going to have Nick Carboni, Danielle Stein with the amazing draft special that they've been working on for weeks and months. That's going to start again in just a few minutes at 7 o'clock. So if you want to check that out, go there. If not, stay right here. We'll be back in a few minutes. All righty, Becca.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes, great job. All right, we're going to continue to talk about these storms. Yowza! Lots of significant severe thunderstorms right now. So 60-mile-per-hour winds, hail. We haven't seen any official reports of quarter-sized hail, at least official pictures and videos, but we know that, of course, the threshold for a severe thunderstorm warning. Thankfully, I haven't seen a lot of reports of flooding either, but we did have one report there in Kings Mountain, a person trapped inside a structure. Again, we don't have more information on what caused that, whether it was a tree on the structure or whether the structure collapsed for some reason. Continuing to get more information on that. We have a reported, I would say official report, just because again, we know that radar indication is not always the same as what's official, of 60-mile-per-hour winds at the Monroe Airport there in Union County. Charlotte Monroe Executive, if you're familiar with that airport. So just continuing to track the action. Becky, are you seeing anything new pop up? I don't really feel like I have seen anything new pop up in terms of latest storms, but we do know that the storms are continuing to push southeast. Oh, I do know, because I was going to say this before, but we had to pop off. James, our producer, let me know in my ear that National Weather Service in Wilmington, there was some chatter about a gustnado near Conway. So if you're familiar with the eastern side of the Carolinas, Conway is essentially 10 minutes from Myrtle Beach. It's where coastal Carolina is. In fact, the station that I worked at, that was my first station, was right across the street from CCU as well. So Conway is essentially smack dab in the middle of that area. You're essentially taking 501 through Conway if you're trying to get toward Myrtle Beach. So gustnados, we know, big swirling vortex of air. It happens a lot of times on the outer edge of a gust front, just from all of the rotation. So it's not a technical tornado, but it's similar to a dustnado, a firenado, where it's like a very, very quick spin up. But just kind of goes to show you how quickly these storms blow up.
It's been very active, especially further east, away from Charlotte over towards Raleigh and off to the coast. Numerous severe thunderstorm warnings, especially in between Raleigh and Fayetteville. Now, a big aspect of today's weather was those downed trees and downed power lines, and I know there were a lot of power issues there, so I want to pull up the Duke Energy map. Currently, what we are seeing across the area, it looks like, I know there was some power outage issues over towards South Park Mall, as well as over towards Providence Road, which is obviously a very busy stretch of roadway as people head down to the south. So want to look a little bit closer. Looks like that's the area that potentially is that Providence. Okay, yes, looks like 589 customers currently without power. Not sure if there's any estimated time of restoration there. There also could potentially be some downed trees and downed power lines in and around this area, so definitely exercise some caution. That's really kind of been the theme of this evening so far. We could potentially see more down trees, more down power lines, especially with these 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts that have been being reported in and around these areas. I do have a couple of other storm reports that are new. This is over towards Indian Trail, a gust of 61 miles per hour. Again, this is in Union County, and then also in Union County, a report of 3/4-inch sized hail as well. So that's below quarter sized. Also what we've been seeing across much of the area as well. Brittany.
That's going to pop up here from Myrtle Beach, so we can kind of look at some of these storms. As you mentioned, Becca, a lot of the eastern side of the Carolinas has dealt with some of the worst of it. This is the Bar Harbor, so if you're familiar again with the area, it's essentially right on the coast there in Myrtle Beach. So I would certainly call that blinding rain. That's what, we give people a heads up, when they're trying to drive through heavy rain. Also looks like the ocean is pretty angry. Not really surprised about that, as these storms are actually just now starting to push through the actual beach itself. Now, again, I mentioned that Conway is essentially right on 501 if you're driving toward Myrtle Beach, but of course you have to go through Wilmington first, then North Myrtle Beach, and then eventually you're going toward Murrells Inlet, Pawleys Island, McClellanville, and eventually those storms will get closer to Charleston. And again, that's a live picture there from Myrtle Beach. One interesting thing I do want to note here about our severe thunderstorm warnings, I pulled up the rest of the Carolinas here, is that, okay, so this is a cluster that we were just watching, right? And in fact, if we went back to the Myrtle Beach camera in a few minutes, I think we'd have more lightning strikes. But notice all of these severe thunderstorm warnings on the outer edge. Look over here, just south and west of Florence. So again, if you're thinking track-wise, Myrtle Beach is here, Conway's probably right there, and then you obviously track inland toward Florence. Eventually you're reaching places just south of us near Westville, and then eventually Columbia if you go south and west, and Greenville, Spartanburg if you stay on that current track. But notice that this huge cluster here of severe thunderstorm warning near Manning, that's also over toward Marion, South Carolina, that is, none of these storms have gone anywhere close. And so the reason why I think that that's important is that essentially means that the National Weather Service is so confident that these storms will continue to not only stay as strong or continue to gain strength as they move south and west to continue to keep that severe thunderstorm warning in place. And that, I think, has been evident across all of this area too, because Greenville, Spartanburg too, even the additional pop-up warnings that we've had locally across the area, because essentially If you are south of Charlotte, with the exception, I would say, of that little cluster I mentioned earlier in Lancaster County, at some point today, you've probably at least seen some form of severe thunderstorm warning, because these storms are continuing to push through, continuing to strengthen. I mean, even this storm here, let's go to the storm in York County right now. Okay, so we're going to zoom in really closely to this one. And James is going to pull up the DOT cam, which I do appreciate. Okay, so this is over. There it is. Okay, so this is a mile marker 84.1. So if you're familiar with South Carolina, Fortville is right around about 82, and then the TKK exits are about 88. So essentially smack dab in between. Again, you can see heavy rain. Becca was mentioning this earlier. A lot of people taking it slow on the roadways, which we would certainly expect to see. Now, thankfully, these areas in South Carolina didn't see a lot of flooding issues with the storms we had 2 weeks ago, as that was a lot of that action was in Mecklenburg County. And then last weekend, we did have some flooding issues as well in parts of the mountains and foothills. And then again, if you're familiar with last Thursday, we had the flooding in Caldwell County. Well, look at how many lightning strikes that we've seen in this area. So again, this is something that we look at not just for number of lightning strikes to give people a heads up, but also for the strengthening potential. So here is the line here with Gaston County. You get toward Clover. Lake Wiley's over here, Newport's here, Fort Mill's here, Kankakee here, Rock Hill is here. All of this cluster of lightning on top of the fact that we have gusty winds at about 60 or so miles an hour. So again, if you were to go outside in this action, this is what increases your risk to be struck by lightning. We're looking at about 57 here. And remember, these are just lightning strikes that are associated with the storm itself. If you remember from the story we had yesterday at Lake Murray, there were about 18 people struck by lightning. Thankfully, everybody was okay, but that was because from what we call a bolt from the blue. A bolt from the blue is essentially where you are is so far away from the actual storm center that you can't see the lightning or hear the thunder, or you could, but maybe it's really far away, hard to see, you have bad eyesight like myself, whatever it is. But we call it that because essentially it means the storms are far enough away that you were not anywhere close to knowing that you were even at risk, and then boom, the lightning strike happens. So it's a day where we especially want folks to remember the lightning safety and kind of take those extra precautions. So for example, let's say that you're out on the boat, in southern Lake Norman, maybe toward Cornelius with friends. And you know there's storms there down in southern Charlotte, maybe down toward Lake Wiley, Steel Creek area. You'd probably want to still make sure you're keeping a close eye on the forecast. A great tool to have. I know we push it all the time, but it's a great tool nonetheless, is that WCNC Charlotte mobile app. Any of those mobile apps that have the lightning data within them and have the storms are easy ways that when you're on the go, you're able to track those things as well. Again, on top of the lightning, lots of heavy rain, lots of really gusty winds. I'm going to put on our hail tracker to see what the latest is here with hail, because it doesn't look like we've seen a lot of recent reports, but a lot of our hail tracker does indicate that there's a pretty decent population here of these tiny little pockets, notice, of bright blue shading. So this here on the northwestern side of Gaston County near Cherville, that of course picking up that potential for a quarter-sized hail. We have this cluster here just on the edge between Gastonia and Gaston County and York County, just east of Clover. Again, this little cluster as well in the panhandle there of York County, heading into southwestern Mecklenburg County. So again, you think 77 is here. We're looking at TKK, Fort Mill, and then Rock Hill. That's on the western side. And then there's again that panhandle near Indian Land. And then here's that cluster near Indian Trail, just east there of Weddington and just west of Waxhaw. So a pretty big cluster here of multiple spots that we could be looking at for some quarter-sized hail. But again, we just haven't had any official reports there of that yet, but we know pea and penny size for sure. Looking like we just got a new report of ½ inch hail near Lake Wiley, York County. So again, no surprise there. But Becca, seeing any other updates? I know you were looking at the power outages, any other any other updates that you're seeing so far that you think would be warranted to send to our viewers?
I was looking at the current wind gust map, and one thing definitely popped out to me, and that was over towards Rock Hill. The most recent wind gust there was around 48 miles per hour, and I actually think it could potentially be higher, especially in and around York County. Also seeing some pretty gusty winds out over towards Greenville, Spartanburg, that could easily be over 60 miles per hour. So this is really the threats going forward into tonight. Winds are going to be the primary concern, probably with lightning. One of the secondary ones is we've just been seeing a ton of lightning strikes just across the area. Now, max wind gusts across the Charlotte area. Sometimes these stations don't pick up some of the most intense winds that we've been seeing. So Rock Hill currently has seen the worst of it across the metro area. According to this, 48 miles per hour reported, up to around 31 in here in the Charlotte area, around 40 closer over towards Fayetteville, and 25 over towards Morganton. I do think we've seen gusts over 60 miles per hour at times, which would indicate that we've seen trees down, some power outages, and of course that's what we've been seeing over the past couple of hours. Do want to point out this. We've got severe thunderstorm warnings pretty much from the Charlotte metro area extending all the way to Myrtle Beach. I actually put a ruler on there, and that's a span of over 180 miles per hour. So this is packing a punch. Tons of lightning strikes from the metro all the way down into the coast as this slowly continues to push off to the south. It's been pretty quiet over the last couple of hours, really for the northern half of the viewing area. We did have that severe thunderstorm warning closer to around 2-3 o'clock over towards Avery and Burke County. That was where the majority of the activity was earlier this afternoon, with reports of even some golf ball sized hail over towards portions of Avery County and Linville Falls. That really has pushed it down to the south, so really not seeing much north of 85 currently. I did want to add this. It looked like the National Weather Service out in Raleigh was going to keep that severe thunderstorm watch for the northern half of the area because they're watching some potential storm development over towards southern Virginia. I don't think that's going to be much of an issue for us, but something that we'll continue to monitor going into the next couple of hours. The majority of, I guess, the hail concerns that we've had, mainly about a quarter size. Again, we did have radar reports of golf ball sized hail over towards Avery County earlier, but haven't got that official confirmation just yet. Severe thunderstorm watch is still out until midnight. That encompasses most of the area all the way down into the coast. Also have that threat for localized flooding as well, especially with the areas that saw lots of rainfall over the past couple of weeks. But unlike last week, this week really featured just hot and mainly dry conditions thanks to that heat dome. So hopefully localized flooding shouldn't be much of an issue as these storms continue to push down to the south. Brittany.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note too that when it comes to, you mentioned the atmosphere being worked over, that is actually going to benefit us heading into Thursday. And there's really two big reasons why. One, we're going to see cooler air starting off the day on Thursday, so we won't be as hot and humid because of the fact that we've had all this rain, cooled air. And two, it will lessen our chance to see strong to severe storms because the atmosphere, as you said, is worked over. These videos coming in from an amazing viewer from Valentine, sent these to me via Facebook. Thank you so much, Deanna. But again, these were pea to penny sized hail stones developing on her deck. It looks like on her outer deck. So again, pea to penny sized. I feel like the best way to describe this is more of a nuisance as much as like the big hailstorm we had last year in Rock Hill that caused us significant damage to all the cars and people's sidings of their homes and things like that. But again, still hailstones nonetheless. And normally, I mentioned this earlier, but when you look at a thunderstorm off in the distance, sometimes the hail can mix in with the heavy rain and almost look like part of the rain shaft. But then once it starts to move over you, you're getting that splat, splat, splat on your windshield. But yeah, so that was from Deanna. Both of the videos I do believe are from her outer deck, but you can kind of see those just populating. Sometimes hail too can almost look like a light little mix of sleet on the ground. So thanks again, Deanna, for sending those in. I know we mentioned this a lot, folks, but the best way to get information to us, pictures and videos, is to always send it either to one of our team of meteorologists, of course, and we can pass it along. But sometimes when things are extra hectic, like today, using the Near Me function in the WCNC Charlotte mobile app is a great tool to have because it goes directly to our newsroom. And of course, we can still get the information and pass it along to them as well. But then we also have the tools available to send that to the National Weather Service. It helps with forecast verification. And again, you're our eyes and ears on the ground. We can't be every single place at every single time. So it's one of the really good benefits of not even just, the internet technology, but social media, things like that. It does look like we're getting a new report here. This is in High Shoals in Gaston County. Trees down reported on the Dallas-Cherville Highway, and it looks like Puetts Chapel Road, if I am saying that correctly, Puetts. The time is estimated from radar, so it does look like that happened about an hour or so ago. So that's an interesting new storm report. It looks like we also got a report from Rock Hill that the ASOS station, so the ASOS is the station essentially where we get temperature, dew point and things like that. So there's one at KCLT, that's the Charlotte Douglas Airport that we're always referencing for like official high temperature, things like that.
Got it.
Well, they had the wind gust in Rock Hill was 48 miles an hour. So that's a new report also coming in. Some of these are, that one likely is happening right now since Becca just mentioned that the storms are so crazy. But before that, the one on trees down on Dallas-Cherville Highway does look like that was a little bit ago. Becca, it looks like you have some new information to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. Our producer James was mentioning over towards York County, where we currently have that severe thunderstorm warning, that there is a potential of a serious crash. And this is on I-77 southbound over towards Gold Hill Road. So this is in between Gold Hill Road and that Fort Mill exit 160. I'd say the average speed currently, according to South Carolina DOT, is about 23 miles per hour and a stretch of delays about 3 miles. So you can see how slow moving those southbound lanes are. You could also see how wet those streets are as well. Of course, we've got a lot of intense rainfall, intense lightning, and intense winds and hail to add along to that. So that is likely making driving conditions very treacherous out there. I'd say it's around 7 o'clock now. That's typically when rush hour traffic really does start to calm down. So the fact that we're starting to see more traffic build up in and around the areas really does say a lot. So definitely take it easy out there. Take it slow. Do want to also get to a couple of other things. If we go ahead and switch to the Doppler radar, one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier was something that Brittany had also talked about, was that outflow boundary and how it has the potential to spark up thunderstorms. So the outflow boundary is basically that green line that you can see that stretches it's a very thin line ahead of that thunderstorm. But you can see how it moves across Chester County. Look at that development of thunderstorms. It basically has exploded on radar with that lightning, intense rainfall as it continues to push down to the south. So we've been saying it pretty much over and over again. These storms have rapidly strengthened in a short period of time. A storm will become very small within the next 10 minutes, and then the next minute you'll see it exploding with convection and updraft. So that's really been a common theme that we've been seeing over the last several hours. Of course, lots of severe thunderstorm warnings out there, lots of lightning strikes as well, but did want to mention, of course, that traffic alert that we've been having over there, Bree.
Yeah, I think that's a good one too. Becca, I did want to mention these two. I did put these in our chat as well, so James probably has these too, but we got two reports from Gaston County here via National Weather Service chat. Two trees fell on structures. Both were in the Cherville area. No injuries reported, so thank goodness for that. But that was at the 1500 block of Lewis Farm Road and the 300 block of West Ballard Street. Again, both in Cherville city limits. Fire crews were on scene for both calls, but again, no injuries. And then it does look like we also have multiple it says numerous trees down in a roadway, widespread in the same area, Cherville to Kings Mountain, all near that Gaston County and Cleveland County line, as I mentioned earlier. Kings Mountain, again, if you're familiar with I-85, you think essentially right on the edge there between Cleveland County and Gaston County. It's right on the edge. They've gotten about 15 calls or so far about some trees being down, blocking some parts of the roadways. But a good reminder, too, that if there ever is a tree down in your area and you're trying to drive on the roadway, be extra cautious if you're trying to go around that tree, because that of course can cause issues as well. New information just coming in as well for York County. Trees down too. Bate Harvey Road in Clover, Regent Parkway in Fort Mill, Riddle Road and Mount Gallant Road in Rock Hill. Numerous power outages, it looks like mainly in the Clover and northern Rock Hill area. So I know that Becca was watching those power outages really closely too earlier. I want to show you something too that just popped up on radar. This is actually not severe thunderstorms, but backbuilding is starting to occur in some of these cells in Charlotte, as well as near the Matthews Mint Hill area. So here's Charlotte, here's Uptown, here's 74. So Matthews here, Mint Hill is here. Some of these storms backbuilding, essentially when there's still enough energy and enough moisture, you can see additional developing here from some of these storms. I want to show you this really quickly. I'm going to pause this so you can see. Okay, look at this really faint green line. Watch. Okay, so look at this in motion. It's almost like a mini gust front that pushed out from some of these storms that were in Gaston County that were pushing toward Mount Holly that now eventually have allowed for additional storms to develop here. So that's showing enough moisture and energy for that storm to backbuild and develop essentially on top of itself. Just like what you see with these storms here on the northern tip of Lake Wylie near that York County and Mecklenburg County line. Essentially that outflow is developing once again and pushing off toward the east, so the storms are able to essentially develop back onto themselves. So again, these are just the different kind of radar signatures that we look at to see, if we expect storms to get weaker, if we expect storms to get stronger. I do think a lot of these storms in York County, and I know Becca was mentioning this earlier, are continuing to strengthen because essentially now we're getting the outflow from both sides and all of these lightning strikes all up and down TKK, Rock Hill, really hugging the I-77 corridor and west. So again, if you're in those areas in York County, I would expect a lot of lightning, a lot of heavy rain, a lot of gusty winds. And now it's essentially going all the way down south, again, into Chester County as well. This is actually pretty rare to see such a large severe thunderstorm warning that goes essentially from Gaston County through York County all the way into Chester County. And that's on top of this large cluster of storms that's already on the southwestern side of Chester County. I mean, James, Becca, how often have you seen a severe thunderstorm warning that essentially encompasses 3 separate counties? It's definitely not something that you see every day.
Sure, and I will say the storm reports that we've been getting just keep adding up. I want to get to one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that person that was reportedly trapped over towards Waco and Cleveland County. And we do have some more information as well as we have a crew on the scene who talked to a firefighter there. So this is close to Sanko Drive, again, Waco and Cleveland County, and 3 people were trapped. There was a woman, man, and child, and this is all supposed to be weather related due to that. And that's according to a firefighter on the scene, and the child involved was 4 months old. So we don't know all the details yet. That will likely come later on in the show, but gives you an idea of just the conditions out there. I know we've had numerous reports of trees down, and we're actually starting to get some more as well. Getting reports of, okay, so this is in York County, trees down on Bate Harvey. This is in Clover. Also Regent Parkway in Fort Mill, Riddle Road, and Mount Gallant Road in Rock Hill, plus numerous power outages, mostly in the Clover and North Rock Hill area. So that's the latest update with storm reports. We'll continue to keep you updated on it, but just good sign to be weather alert as these storms continue to push off to the south. That is a large cluster of severe thunderstorm warnings with lightning, intense winds. So we've been seeing anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per hour across the area. And when you combine those winds with the intense rainfall, you get down trees and down power lines. So that's exactly what we've been seeing. We'll have another update on power outages coming up. Brittany.
All right. So are we going to go Kings Mountain first, James, before we talk about the video? Okay, so we have a live look here from Kings Mountain. So this is what Becca was just talking about. Just so I'm correct on that, right, James? This is the area too. Okay, so this is what Becca was just talking about. We have a crew on scene. This was the report that we had earlier of people being trapped inside of a structure. Becca just mentioned a second or so ago that it was a woman, man, and child trapped. The child was about 4 months old. Everyone is okay, but you can see the quick snap here of this tree. I mean, it literally looks like you just broke a pencil in half. It's so, stark there. And again, we were looking at some of these storms, again, showing the really, really heavy rain, the gusty winds, and the quick downbursts. Think about a thunderstorm being on top of that tree. You get those strong bursts of winds, about 60 plus miles an hour, and very quickly a tree, especially one that's older, maybe has had a lot of saturation, so it's already a little bit weak, can snap very, very, very quickly. We see this a lot, even especially over near the station, actually near Charlotte Douglas, near the airport, as well as in eastern sides of Charlotte, especially toward Matthews as well as East Charlotte, because there's so many of those large oak trees. So a big snap there, tree. Again, thankfully, we're getting reports that the people that were in the structure that were trapped are okay at this time. So something we'll continue to monitor. And of course, if Siobhan Riley gets any more information, we'll be sure to continue to let them know. So let's go to the quick video, James, that you were talking about earlier of the pool, just because I think I would be remiss if we didn't show that one. So this comes in from Kyle Lanissa. He is an emergency management coordinator for UNC Charlotte, sent this in to National Weather Service chat. So this is high rate 274 and Dameron Road in Bessemer City. This happened around 6:20. So you can just see how gusty the winds are, how the trees are essentially being pushed over toward the side, the heavy rain. I mean, it looks like someone just blew a strong, big downburst in this area. You can see how quickly the trees are looking over, how quickly the water is moving. So that's just some pretty intense video there. Again, that's from Bessemer City just about an hour or so ago. Looks like we're getting more shots here from Siobhan's camera there in Kings Mountain. So just want to show people this. I don't want to be presumptuous there, but looking at this video, it does look like that maybe is a deck of some sort, maybe a front porch in which the trees fell in that same spot. So these are different trees than the ones that they were showing us earlier. Looks like they're panning the camera around the property. Okay, so that on the right-hand portion of your screen, that was the tree that we saw just a second or so ago, and now it looks like they are reconvening to look a little bit closer to where those structures were. Again, that's in Kings Mountain. Right now, those areas in Kings Mountain are not being impacted nearly as much, maybe a little bit of light rain, but nothing too intense right now. But again, we still have this severe thunderstorm warning that essentially starts here, southern Gaston County, and goes all the way into York County as well as Chester. I am starting to see one tiny thing that I'm noticing that I guess is technically new, is right here, this cell over Lake Wylie. This area here shaded in the really, really bright pink returns. Typically, when we're seeing that bright pink return, it's not indicating heavy rain. What it indicates is heavy rain and hail being mixed in, which is why it's looking much brighter than some of the other areas. So again, this is near Lake Wylie. We're going to zoom in to street level here so folks can see this closer to home. So there's Lake Wylie. There. Whoop. Okay, so there's Lake Wylie. There's Pine Harbor, and if you look over toward the west, here's Sledge Road. Here's what looks like Highway 160. And so it's this area that's starting to see those bright pink returns. If we put on the hail tracker, yep, we'll probably see some of that indication. So I'm gonna make this go into a stop motion, and then we're gonna zoom back out here for you. So there's Pine Harbor, again, Sledge Road. Notice these returns. Again, that's indicating some quarter-sized hail here near Lake Wylie. That, of course, in South Carolina, right on the edge between York County, Mecklenburg County, and of course Gaston County too. We've seen a lot of these clusters as well over in northwestern parts of York County too. So again, if you're in that area, I would not be surprised if you're not seeing some really strong returns of potential hail in that area. So just something to be mindful of. Looking to see if we got any other updates. Becca, anything else that you are seeing?
One thing that I was seeing is that a new report came out between around 7:19, and this was a report of golf ball sized hail in Clover. That is in York, South Carolina. So someone sent this in as a report estimated from radar. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor. We've been seeing mainly around quarter sized hail across the area. Had one report radar indicated of golf ball sized hail earlier up towards Avery and Burke County. But not only is this packing a punch in terms of lightning, wind, but also hail alongside with it, as Brittany was just showing us across the Lake Wylie area. We've got all these lightning strikes just from the Charlotte area all the way down towards Chester. That includes to portions of Lancaster and Chesterfield. We've got up to 673 lightning strikes within this vicinity. So this is not something that you are going to want to go out of. Definitely stay indoors and stay away from any electronics. Of course, it is also National Lightning Safety Week. And of course, we had that horrible lightning strike over towards Lake Murray, South Carolina yesterday that sent 18 people to the hospital. So the worst places to be during a thunderstorm is open fields, top of a hill, near tall, isolated trees, and definitely not near water or metal. Best place to be is going to be hunkered down in a shelter, inside a car or a building. Storm reports keep adding up over the past 30 minutes to about an hour. A couple of new ones that I've just been seeing is over towards Lake Wylie. This was reported close to around 6:47, so about 45 minutes ago, with half-inch sized hail. Also over towards Rock Hill is where we did have that thunderstorm thunderstorm wind gust of around 48 miles per hour. Now, we do have that severe thunderstorm watch that continues until midnight as these storms continue to slide down to the southeast. There is plenty of instability still in the atmosphere, so we will continue to stay with you on WCNC Plus and track these storms in real time, as these are slow movers, especially south alongside that I-85 corridor and southward over towards the Charlotte area and our South Carolina county. So we will definitely be watching for the potential of some localized flooding as well.
Yeah, so we're going to actually go back to Kings Mountain where we have our crew on scene. Again, this was earlier today. We told you about a structure had a person trapped inside. We are just now learning that that was 3 people, a man, a woman, and a child. We're told by a neighbor that the child was 4 months old. Good news is that everybody is okay. I don't think we have confirmation that everybody is out, but we do have confirmation that everybody is okay. So we are now very clearly being able to see that that was a tree that fell on a home of some sort. You can see it almost looks like part of the home is just essentially crushed off to the side. I mean, think about a large tree of this nature essentially falling smack dab on top of your home. So, I mean, it's a hard thing even to prepare for when you have these large trees on your property, because other than doing a tree, what we always call it a tree checkup, and knowing whether or not a tree is potentially diseased or dead or something like that, and it really doesn't look like this tree was one of them. This just looks like one of those unfortunate situations where you get a really strong downburst and that allows for those trees to fall down. So very thankful at this point that this man, woman, and child are okay. If our crew on scene continues to get any additional information, we will continue to keep you updated, not just here on WCNC Plus, but of course over on WCNC Charlotte as well. Speaking of trees down, we're getting multiple reports right now from Cleveland County of over 20 trees down just all over the city and the town, or I guess technically the county of Cleveland County, and they're going to work on getting us more information on all of the addresses later on. Now, I want to show you a different kind of view, and this is going to be from Carowinds, because right now with some of these storms that are continuing to push southward, we are essentially seeing storms moving right over the camera at this time. Now this is way high up, but you can see some of those coasters there. I can't even tell, honestly, because of all the rain, but it looks like that might be the Fury right there in the front part of your screen. So again, heavy rain right now. We're getting really big, large cluster of storms that's continuing to push there south and southeast. Something else that I know Becca was mentioning earlier is the storms, unfortunately, are really slow moving, and because of the back building potential as well, you're essentially seeing storms over the same areas that already saw storms. Now, if we look at actual radar, it looks like some of this area of Carowinds is seeing some more light to moderate right now, but as the storms continue to push southward, I think these storms that are right now over Shopton near the Steel Creek area are going to eventually start to push a little bit further south, and so Carowinds will get a much bigger mess than what they're currently dealing with, I would say, within the next 15 minutes or so. If we look at radar in just a second, you can actually see again the storms that are continuing to develop here and continuing to push toward the south. I'm going to zoom out even a little bit more so you can see it's not just us here in Charlotte. Look at this cluster. Oop, I went too far. Navigating this without a real mouse is always a challenge. So here, I mean, look at this line. We have Greenville, Spartanburg here. We have this line of strong storms. Look at this big, large swath of severe thunderstorms. Look at all of this lightning. Again, that's pushing south of Chester, and it expands all the way, looping around Florence, South Carolina, again, Conway, Myrtle Beach, and is continuing to push further south and southwest. So this large cluster of storm activity is going to continue to impact mainly South Carolina as it pushes southward. I know Becca mentioned this a second ago. We still have the severe thunderstorm watch in effect until midnight. I do think parts of the atmosphere further north in the northern part of our viewing area are probably worked over enough that we wouldn't see additional severe weather. But I do think these areas, especially south of Charlotte, do still have plenty of instability to work with, as we're still about an hour or so away from sunset, that we could see additional severe thunderstorms and additional strong storms continue to develop. Even like what we just saw in Charlotte a little bit ago, where we had new storms, and while they're not severe, they're still causing some really gusty winds in some of those areas. So that's the current radar, what we're dealing with. Seeing any new stuff, my friend, over on the other side of the studio?
Yes, we actually have a
Live view. This is over towards North Charlotte. We're looking towards I-77 just past I-85. I believe this is maybe close to Sunset Road, so past LaSalle Street, where we are seeing another cell kind of develop across the Charlotte metro area. Most of that was pushing down to the south, but a new cell just popped up. Got a couple of lightning strikes. I could hear a little bit of thunder from the studio right now as this continues to push down to the east. But this is exactly what I want to show you. It's that camera intensely shaking. So this could very well be what we call a wet microburst, which is what we've been warning people about over the past several hours, pretty much since the day began. And it basically fuels on heat and humidity, and we had tons of it today. Now, the atmosphere was a little bit capped in the Charlotte area earlier on this afternoon, but the cap has broken. That really keeps a lid on thunderstorm developments, but certainly was not the case over the past several hours. So this gives you an idea of road conditions. Obviously, people are moving slow out there. Take it easy. We'll continue to monitor that as well. Did also want to show this as well. The max wind gusts that we've seen so far now officially being reported over towards Monroe, that 61 mile per hour wind gust, also over towards Rock Hill. And it's really a lot of our South Carolina counties, also over towards Cleveland, that have been seeing some of the worst of it as these slow moving thunderstorms continue to push off down to the south. But numerous reports of trees and power outages. Power outages is also something that I wanted to get to as well. As we take a look at Duke Energy, we're now up to around 6,000 people currently, customers, without power across the Charlotte area, but also over towards Greenville, Spartanburg. We've had numerous power outages there, now up to around 17,000 customers currently without power. And this is where we also have some pretty intense thunderstorms as well. So currently 6,000 customers without power in the Charlotte area. And I've been refreshing this page. So this is absolutely weather related. And again, if you do, I know as these storms continue to pass, we're weather alert for that. But even after the storm passes, there could very well be tree debris. Also down power lines as well. And so that's also something that you'll have to worry about after the fact as well. Brittany?
Something that I did just see pop up, and I know, Becca, you have experience with this as well, living, of course, in the South for quite some time and also working in the South as well, is that they have a new severe thunderstorm warning that was just issued for this cell here in Charlotte. So this, of course, in Mecklenburg County. It's right over the city, and again, generally shifting south and west. You can see all the different warnings kind of looking like a puzzle piece, like they're being pieced together. This is very typical with these days where we have essentially those different flows. We talked about this yesterday, coming in from the east, coming in from the west. As they converge, of course, they can cause a big blow up. You get additional outflow boundaries, and you can have more storms that develop in the same exact spot. So sometimes you get these warnings that almost look like they're pieced a little funky together, but essentially it's because there's so many different storms coming in from so many different spots. So again, we had this storm here. This was pushing south and west. Notice this storm is pushing south, and actually it looks like it's essentially sitting over that same spot in Gaston County and York County. Then we have these Monroe storms that are generally shifting south and west, but then sometimes you'll get one little storm that all of a sudden wants to go further north. So when you have these different storms that are essentially being pieced together, it's not a really strong cold front that's coming in north and west and pushing south and east. Boom, here comes the dynamite, you're done. Or it's not a warm front coming in from the south and pushing toward the north. It is these tiny little clusters of storms that are converging together, coming toward each other, moving away from each other. So if you've gotten a lot of warnings in your particular area, know that there's no really true rhyme or reason why you might be seeing storms or these warnings issued, and this storm is moving this way and this moon is moving this way. It's not dependent on where you live. There's not some weird atmospheric motion happening. It's just, again, the general trend that we see during the summertime when there's so many different things happening at the same time. Now, what we can tell you is as we zoom out a little bit here, which I know I showed this just a second ago, but I just have to show it again because it's so intense. So while these clusters are still kind of being pieced again, moving together, these general storms from Greenville all the way toward Winsboro and then now pushing towards Sumter, South Carolina, are still generally pushing southward. And as this large cluster does so, I do think there's plenty of moisture, plenty of instability still there to continue to see those storms tap in. So once the storms kind of wrap up closer to home, closer to the Charlotte area, you're definitely going to notice that things will start to calm down a bit because the atmosphere, as I mentioned, will be worked over. But if you have friends or family members in Columbia, South Carolina, down toward Augusta, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, even McClellanville there on the east coast there, just south of Myrtle Beach. I would definitely make sure that they're aware that storms are on the way, because I don't see any indication at this point that these storms wouldn't continue to either keep their current strength or even get a little bit stronger as they move that way. So again, that's an update from the National Weather Service there on the fact that they have that new severe thunderstorm warning. It does look like it in Lawrence, South Carolina. That's not in our viewing area, but they do have a new severe thunderstorm warning, and it looks like they do have a higher tag on that one of hail about 1.5 inches, which is golf ball sized. I know Becca mentioned a second or so ago that we did have an official storm report in Charlotte, or I guess technically just outside of Charlotte, but our viewing area nonetheless of the golf ball sized hailstone. Now it looks like I'm remiss to find that one, but I know that we did have it just a little bit ago. All right, Becca, while I look for that report, I'm going to toss it to you because I know you have new amazing information to share with us.
And of course, another live view. This is a live view over towards the Steel Creek area. It gives you an idea of the conditions out there as these severe thunderstorm warnings continue to push across much of the area. It is pouring out there. I will say some of these thunderstorms that have continued to work down to the south, this is a loop from the past 2 hours. You can see lightning has actually started to weaken out, especially from the Charlotte area down into York County. So that is a sign that the atmosphere is getting a little bit spent. Of course, there is still a lot of instability out there, but not nearly as many lightning strikes as what we are seeing just within the past half hour. Of course, the big cluster of thunderstorms is still on the
All right, Becca, I think your mic is going in and out probably because it needs new batteries. So we're going to have the team come out and get them to you so that you can continue to chat with us. Storms, man, these are just getting very, very, very strong, large. I guess they always typically were, but as they continue to move further south, I mean, this large cluster is going to continue to cause some intense storm action here. The metro, again, most of these storms starting to redevelop, I would say. Good news here is that if you're in Charlotte, you're in parts of Gaston County here, northern York, a lot of you are starting to see a diminishment in your lightning strikes. Notice that over the last hour or so. Again, we mentioned that lightning strikes, seeing a large cluster happening all at once sometimes means strength and starting to build. Sometimes when you see those start to dissipate, it means that the storms are either trying to settle or dissipate altogether. Now, in this case, I don't think that they're dissipating, but I do think that they're becoming a little bit less strong, a little bit less aggressive, and that's why on the southern side of our viewing area, we're starting to see that large cluster of lightning strikes become even larger, stronger, and more aggressive because they're starting to tap in again to that further south lightning that is available there. If we want to take this DOT camera, you could just see a big shake there just a second or so ago. Becca was mentioning that likely a wet microburst, essentially when we have a lot of warmth and humidity and all of that wetness in the way up high in the atmosphere, all of the heavy rain, all of the hail potential, it essentially gets all warped together and then boom, shoves to the ground. And sometimes you can have a wet microburst or a regular downburst. Normally, when we talk about these in Charlotte, it's about 60 to 80 miles an hour, but sometimes they can actually get up to 125 miles an hour. So microburst, downburst, wet macroburst, there's all kinds of different words for them. Essentially, a downburst normally means that you're dealing with a classic severe thunderstorm risk, like a cold front's coming through. Wet microbursts are a little bit more likely to happen on days like this when it's summertime and it's hot and humid. But microburst versus macroburst, if you're not familiar with the two separate terms, it's just the size. So a microburst is a downburst or a wet downburst that is essentially 2.5 miles or less, and then 2.5 miles or larger is typically a macroburst. So again, it's the word parts, micro versus macro in general. It does look like we have a live look at our uptown tower camera, since I see that at the bottom of your screen. Again, you just see the heavy rain right now moving over Charlotte. I mentioned this a second or so ago, but you can see again, there's some lightning, but just not a ton of lightning strikes. I think that is indicative that things are just trying to kind of settle down at this point, not be quite as aggressive as where they were earlier. We're also seeing a lot of heavy rain too from our Dallas tower camera as well, if that's something that we want to pop up. I do think Becca has her microphone back up, so if we want to do a little test here live on screen to see if we can chat with her. Test 1 2, test 1 2.
1 2 3 1 2 3. All right,
oh, there
here we go.
is.
Yes, and I know exactly where this view is. I-77 at I-85. Look how much the camera is shaking out there. So that is part of that severe thunderstorm warning that was over towards Mecklenburg County, I believe. But what I just saw from that National Weather Service in Columbia is actually the severe thunderstorm warnings that were coming out of Chesterfield County, now over towards Winnsboro. They've actually upgraded it now to tag a 70-mile-per-hour wind. So these thunderstorms have basically organized into kind of a little bit of a line there as they've continued to push down to the south, and that's where that big cluster of thunderstorms was. Now, like what you were mentioning earlier, not nearly as much lightning further off over towards York and Mecklenburg County, at least compared to what we were seeing over the past hour or so. I'd still say rainfall rates are pretty intense, especially the further south you travel. I'd be very interested to know how much rainfall this is dumping just from today's storms. I think we could very well could see anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rainfall, especially in some isolated spots that truly saw the heaviest rainfall that has really just been pouring nonstop here. So this is going to be continuing to move down to the south. Want to get to a couple of storm reports, new ones, especially just within the past couple of hours. We do still have those reports of utility lines down. This is along Providence Road where we did actually confirm with Duke Energy that there was power outages in and around that area. Again, that is a busy stretch of roadway. So with utility lines down, the potential of trees down, that's definitely an area that you would tag to have some caution. Also over towards Weddington, got some reports from quarter-sized hail. We've got several reports of that as well. Over towards Union County, a report of about 3/4-inch hail, and also, of course, that thunderstorm wind gust of about 61 miles per hour. That's the highest wind gust that we've seen reported, at least one of the stations so far. Up to the north, basically along 85 and up towards northern Piedmont, foothills, mountains, it is quiet. Now, it was very active early on this morning, especially up in the mountains and foothills. Now that has all dragged down to the south. I want to highlight some of this because it was so hot and humid today. It was actually the hottest day of the year with that heat index peaking at 110. We reached the triple-digit mark officially at the Charlotte Douglas Airport, and we also reached the highest dew point of the year as well of 77. So this heat and humidity definitely plays a part into the storms that we're seeing today. Pretty much every storm that has developed has rapidly strengthened into a severe thunderstorm warning, big, tall updrafts, dropping down hail, as well as really intense rainfall rates, and of course, tons of lightning. So that is why we are weather alert. We do have that active severe thunderstorm watch that does go into midnight. And of course, we will be streaming on WCNC Plus to keep you guys safe. Brittany.
One thing that actually we just got a notification there in National Weather Service chat is so in Winnsboro, which are the storms that are moving just south of Chester County. Notice Winnsboro right here is almost being covered by, I always forget sometimes you guys can't see the mouse. So Winnsboro is right here, obviously about to be covered by all of this lightning. We are starting to get reports here that they are expecting to see wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour there. So I wouldn't be surprised if those areas between Winnsboro and Blythewood just before Columbia aren't upgraded to a considerable severe thunderstorm warning. Remember that severe thunderstorm warnings, just like flood advisories, essentially have 3 categories: base, considerable, and destructive. So when it comes to severe thunderstorm warnings, a base is 60 miles an hour. That's the classic that we get a lot of times here in Charlotte. Considerable, again, is 70. Destructive is 80 or higher. And it's the same thing. There's 3 different thresholds too when it comes to hail. But in this specific case, we're talking about wind. So on top of all of this lightning, 70-mile-per-hour winds likely. Again, if you have friends or family in this area, Winnsboro, Blythewood, over toward Camden, Newberry, even Columbia, I would not be surprised, again, if these storms continue to hold together and create extremely, extremely strong winds. You can again see this goes all the way into Lawrence, South Carolina, where we had those reports there about 1.5 inches of hail earlier. And notice this outflow is going all the way into Greenwood. So because of that, I would expect additional storms too to develop along that as well over toward Kirksey. And as we travel over to the eastern side of the Carolinas, now some of these storms that were over Myrtle Beach earlier are starting to weaken now, but I'm going to pull this out here. Okay, here we go. So here's Myrtle Beach again. Here's McClellanville as you continue to move further south. You got Georgetown and then eventually Charleston, South Carolina. So here's that severe thunderstorm warning right now just north of Charleston. They don't have any storms yet, but again, we would expect these cluster to hold together and at least produce a severe thunderstorm warning with 60+ mile-per-hour winds. Now, I mentioned this earlier when it came to the cell here that was moving toward Manning. It's the same for Sumter, though, as well as these areas just north of Charleston, even though they are probably at least 30 minutes, if not an hour or more away because of the fact that they've been so slow moving. We're already seeing those severe thunderstorm warnings continuing to shift further south. Folks, typically that is not, I was about to say typically that's not typical. Well, of course, I just said that. That is not typical. That is atypical because normally you want to wait to see what happens when the storm moves into a new atmospheric area. What happens is it gets closer to 8 and eventually 8:30. But that is just showing the confidence right now of the National Weather Service that these storms have been so strong and have tapped so much into all of the available warmth and humidity that they're expecting literally over an hour or so away for these storms to still be extremely strong. And so that's what's prompted this entirety of all of these severe thunderstorm warnings. Now, if you have friends or family in Myrtle Beach, in Wilmington, in Whiteville, North Carolina, their risk of severe storms, at least for now, is over as this cluster continues to push further south. And again, we're seeing the same thing here locally. You're south of Great Falls, toward Winnsboro, toward Blythewood, toward Greenwood, just south of Greenville, Spartanburg. I mean, there's just no shortage of substantial strong storms at this point. Wowza. Right now, it looks like this severe thunderstorm warning, too, that we have at least over Mecklenburg County is in effect till 8:15. So it's just past 7:45 now. So we would expect that one to still hold on for at least 30 or so minutes. I know that we are getting thunder. I almost said thunderstorms. Well, yeah, thunder specifically, though, at the station right now, which we are just off Billy Graham, right by the airport. And it does look like we got an airport weather warning. We get the updates, via text message from the National Weather Service, but it does look like there's impact there for Charlotte Douglas. So I don't know, James, if you've already looked at this, you might have, since you probably got the alert as well. But do we know if there's any ground stop or any issues at CLT right now? Normally they don't send those airport weather warnings unless they're seeing a potential ground stop or more issues. So. Yep, they're holding. So if you have a late, maybe night flight, make sure you are double checking that before you head to the airport. Look how amazing he is. So at least until 8:15, they're going to be at a ground stop here. So you can see Dallas, Fort Worth. There's a ground. Are these going into or out of Charlotte? Or are these just the airports in general? Out. Okay, so specific. Ow! Oh my gosh, I just bit my tongue, you guys. Okay, so ground stop specifically for Charlotte. So it looks like departures to Charlotte Douglas or ground stop. Okay, yeah. So departures probably and arrivals. Probability of extension is medium, so 30 to 60%. I would say that that's probably not going to get pushed past 8:15 just because of the fact that the storm hopefully will be winding down at that point, but certainly a possibility. So total delays today at Charlotte Douglas 446. Total delays within, into, or out of. What? Okay, 446. Cancellations 35. Total. Okay, yeah. So essentially that means the same exact thing. So total delays about 446. Total cancellations 35. We don't know if any and or all of them, nothing in, nothing out is what James is saying. So we obviously have no idea whether or not to know how many of those specifically are due to what's happening right now, but we can certainly assume that at least some of them, since they are currently at a ground stop both in and out of CLT. Not surprising because of the gusty winds. Normally lightning specifically isn't too much of an issue, especially with experienced pilots, because you can normally drive. I said drive. Well, I guess I did say drive. You can normally fly around, a lot of isolated thunderstorms especially, but with a large cluster like this, let's say you were trying to fly into Charlotte and you had to go this way. I mean, think about how much you would have to go around to get back in. So sometimes they'll just wait just because it makes more sense either financially or based on how much gas they have, or sometimes they won't take off for those same exact reasons. But normally when the storms are a little bit more isolated, they can fly around, but it's the gusty winds that can create bigger issues. If you think back to some, look at that flight radar. So yeah, there's planes circling. There you go. You can see some reds, some yellows. None are green, which green means go, which means that they're able to get down there. Look at that, circles waiting to land. So that one looks like it's coming in from LAX there. I thought I saw one earlier that was from DFW, Dallas Fort Worth. That's from Indianapolis. So if you have friends or family, PBI, that's Fort Lauderdale, maybe. West Palm, I was close. It's like Sarasota, how could I forget? Oh, that's not even coming here, but SRQ is Sarasota, so there you go. So they're flying in and out. That one probably too also, that's going into Savannah. That probably also is having to circle a little bit too because the storms are moving that way. Also just a reminder too that one of the reasons why winds are such a big deal for airplanes, I know that Becca was mentioning this earlier, but when it comes to the downbursts, downbursts have actually been a reason why a lot of planes, especially here in Charlotte, a lot of our planes that have come down and crashed and even caused fatalities have been because of downburst winds. There's a very famous one story that Larry always tells about. Oh yeah, I guess we could pop up the IQ. Yeah, Larry always tells that famous story about our radar signature doing its best to try to pick up some of the downbursts. During, I believe it was 1994, but just unfortunately, we just didn't have the same satellite and radar capabilities that we have today. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about downbursts, here's some girl to tell you about them. Severe thunderstorms generate 90% of wind damage in the Carolinas, which is why you'll see more yearly damage reports from strong winds over tornadoes. What makes straight-line wind different is in its name. These winds within a thunderstorm don't rotate. Unlike tornadoes, which pick things up and throw them around, these winds blow directly across an area. Straight-line winds can impact power lines, block roadways, and topple massive trees. Falling trees account for nearly 3/4 of all wind-related deaths. One form of damaging winds are downbursts. A downburst is created by an area of rain-cooled air that sinks rapidly to the surface. As the air hits the ground, it is forced to spread out at a speed of up to 150 miles per hour. A microburst is a downburst with a diameter of 2.5 miles or less, whereas a macroburst is much larger. These wind events can destroy entire buildings and are very hard to predict. When damaging winds threaten the Carolinas, the National Weather Service will issue a severe thunderstorm warning, which means you can expect winds up to 60 miles per hour or greater. These should be treated with urgency, just like tornado warnings. Find an interior room on the lowest level of your home away from windows. Cover your head with a pillow or helmet to prevent injury from debris. No matter a tornado or strong winds, Mother Nature's destruction can take only seconds. With your Weather IQ, I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees. Obviously, I was kidding since that was me. I just want to make that clear, just in case anybody could not know. Trying to, give a little personality here as we talk about storms. So Becca, we haven't seen you in a while. What is going on? Are you seeing anything new, the latest, any more information? I think we did just get a few more reports there from Cleveland County, it looks like.
I'm looking at the same thing that you're looking at. So we've got two new tree reports down. This is over towards Waco in Cleveland County, according to the fire department there. Mary's Grove Church Road, that's the intersection where we have that first tree down. And then the second one looks like it is on maybe the intersection or at the street of New Prospect Church Road. So those are two new reports of trees down over towards Waco and Cleveland County. This area was very hard hit. I mean, we continue to keep getting storm reports from this specific area. Also, do want to highlight a couple of also new thunderstorm reports as well. Our producer over towards Steel Creek, Spencer actually sent this in, and this is some dime-sized hail that was confirmed over towards Steel Creek. It's very small, probably bigger impact because
they already are.
Definitely more of those intense winds and intense rain, so definitely below severe weather criteria, at least in terms of hail, but does confirm kind of what we were seeing on radar as well. We also do have that report of a tree down on the house. This was that report over towards Kings Mountain as well in Cleveland County that did trap those 3 people who are currently safe, and our crew is on the scene of that as well. Do also want to turn over to radar, because one of the things that we've been monitoring is those intense lightning strikes. I will say I took the lightning measure about 30 minutes ago, and it was measuring over 600 lightning strikes. Now starting to see around 400. So that's an indication that the worst of the storms are really starting to leave us. So now seeing it brush towards the southern portion of Chester, Lancaster, all the way down into Chesterfield counties. So we do still have a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings close to around the Charlotte metro, but much of the worst weather has pushed down to the south over towards Winnsboro, also approaching Columbia, South Carolina as well. And this is packing a punch, not only with intense lightning, as you can see, but also with the potential of 60 to even 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So a couple of things that we'll be keeping an eye on, but thankfully it does look like the worst of the weather is pushing down to the south. Brittany?
I know it looks like too we're getting some chatter back and forth in the NWS chat from Columbia about those storms going through Winnsboro. We've gotten reports of hail, but just not the specific size yet. So really, really closely monitoring that, because I think that will be very indicative when it comes to the storms. And their strength. And Becca was just talking about this, about the weakening, but even just look at this latest. I mean, this was the severe thunderstorm warning for Gaston, Chester, Mecklenburg, and York counties, supposed to be in effect till 8:15. Look how quickly the storms have dissipated. I mean, that essentially happened over essentially a 10-minute span. Again, here's Charlotte, Pineville, Matthews. A lot of these storms that are in Union County right now are under what's called a special weather statement. So again, that's just one kind of tier below a severe thunderstorm warning. Right now, that's for pea-sized hail, so very, very small hail, and wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. So as Becca mentioned, it's not that the storms aren't still impacting some of our area, it's just that the storms are much, much less than what they were before. I think it's also a good idea to just remind folks that since this week is Lightning Safety Awareness Week, and we had the 18 people yesterday that were struck by lightning, thankfully everybody was okay. It's just a good reminder that even an evening like this, even once the sun goes down, if you're still hearing the thunder, seeing the lightning, or even just getting those alerts straight to your phone, you still want to make sure you're staying weather aware. Now, I don't want to not talk about the storms and how they're impacting people, but Becca, we should talk about the fact that one of the reasons why we're having so much storm activity today is because of the above average intense heat that we had earlier today, and how that is going to be changing over the next few days.
That's right. It was officially the hottest day out of the entire year. So the official stats and the numbers today were, well, the highest peak heat index, 110, and that was the greatest so far. Yesterday's peak heat index was 105, so we felt 5 degrees above that. We also reached the triple-digit mark here at the Charlotte Douglas Airport of 100 degrees. The last time the Charlotte area hit 100 was last July, and of course the highest dew point of 77. That is tropical-like air, which contributed to why the actual temperature, it actually felt 10 degrees hotter than that. Of course, that's helping fuel these thunderstorms, but I also want to highlight the mountains as well. And as it was warm from the mountains all the way into the metro and Ashe County, Jeff